Good evening, everyone. Today, iSPELL is celebrating 94th Sunday Sahityak Satsang. And on this occasion, I would like to invite Dr. Preeti Chaudhary, President of iSPELL Rajasthan Forum and event coordinator of this month, to welcome the invitees and to introduce the Master of Ceremonies. Please, ma'am.
And please just send me a voice note.
This Lakshmikant Karmakar.
Thanks a lot, sir. If there are mics on, please, it would be great if you could unmute them. Sorry, mute them up for us. Good evening, one and all, to this 94th Eid Satsang today, and to the concluding session of the series of lectures themed on eco-criticism. So on behalf of iSPELL India and Rajasthan Forum, I welcome you all to this platform once again. It gives me and us immense pleasure to have Dr. Goutam Karmakar, who is an industrious academician and a rigorous researcher. So just the day before, only I have been sharing with him how he wonders us by with his regular research publication updates in the Elsevier or Scopus Index journals. So welcome you here, sir. It's our sheer privilege to listen him deliberating on post-colonial ecologies, which is commonly appended as literatures of environment. So I once again here on behalf of iSPELL India and Rajasthan Forum. Welcome, sir. I also welcome Dr. A.S. Puamma, ma'am, principal. The rest of the introduction we would have before she speaks. So she is an amazing human being, first of all, and a very nice academician, administrator. And we look forward to her observational remarks as a chair after the keynote speakers deliberation. And we stand extremely humble to you, ma'am, for having you here and for being here. So thanks a lot for your consent, and I welcome you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And with this, I welcome and invite Mr. Lakshmikant Kapkate to steer the session for us as Master of Ceremonies. He is an assistant professor of English at Shiva Prasad Sadanand Jaiswal College, Arjuni, Morgaon, Nagpur. In his administrative capacity, he is also working as IQAC coordinator, and he specializes in post-colonial studies and deems very fit to steer this session for us on post-colonial ecologies. He is also researching on voices of subalterns with reference to Buchi M. Cheta's fiction for his rural thesis. I welcome you here, sir, and I invite you to take reign of the session now on. Welcome you, and I welcome all our participants and audience to this concluding session we have today on post-colonial ecologies. I welcome all the iSPELlians, Ghanshyam sir, everyone. My hearty welcome to one and all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So on behalf of iSPELL India, I welcome you all, first of all. And before going into the details of all this session, let me congratulate to this forum for completing this journey of this Sunday Sahityak Satsang. Today we are celebrating the 94th Sunday Sahityak Satsang today on this virtual platform. And today we have a theme that is post-colonial ecologies. So today, dear friends, first of all, I would like to welcome the President of iSPELL India, Dr. Anupama Vohra. I must also welcome the founder of iSPELL India, Dr. G. Ghanshyam sir, who is a motivational and inspirational figure behind all these forums and all these branches. I must also welcome Dr. Ashok Sachdeva sir, who is the Vice President of iSPELL India. With a due respect, I also welcome today's chairperson, Dr. A.S. Kuamama, who is a principal and associate professor of English, Kaveri College, Bijapur, Karnataka. Today's keynote speaker is Dr. Goutam Karmakar, sir, National Research Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow, University of Western Cape, South Africa. I welcome today's event coordinator, Dr. Preeti Ma'am, who is the president of iSPELL Rajasthan Forum and working as a assistant professor of English at University of Rajasthan, Jaipur. I also welcome all the dignitaries, stalwarts, respected conveners, coordinators, respected members, and all these people, those who are forums. Dear friends, today we are celebrating, as I have already said, post-colonial ecologies. Recently, we have celebrated the Environment Day in this month. And this theme is perfectly matched with this topic also. Today, two themes. One is post-colonial literature, and the another one is ecological concern to this literature. So while discussing with all this literature, we will try to explore with the help of our resource person. So before going into the details of this
Hello.
I think he is losing on connection.
Right.
We all have like technical boundings, and let me just check with him. Anyways, I think I can move forward with the introduction of our keynote speaker. So Goutam Karmakar is PhD English and is a National Research Foundation postdoctoral fellow at University of Western Cape, South Africa. He's also an assistant professor of English at Barabazar Bikram Tudu Memorial College, Sidho Kanu Bisha University, Purulia, West Bengal, India. His forthcoming and recently published edited volumes are The Poetry of Jiban Das, Aesthetics, Poetics, and Narratives, which would be published, which has been published by Rule forthcoming, and Narratives of Trauma in South Asian Literature. This book is also forthcoming by Rule Publications. And The City Speaks, Urban Spaces in Indian Literature. It has been published by Rule again in 2022. And Religion in South Asian Anglophone Literature, Traversing Resistance, Margins, and Extremism has been published in 2021 by the same publication. He has been published vividly and widely in journals, including Journal of Environmental Planning and Management, Comparative Literature East and West, Melis, South Asian Review, Journal of Graphic Novels and Comics, Interdisciplinary Literary Review, Journal of Gender Studies, Journal of Postcolonial Writing, National Identities, Nationalism, and Ethnic Politics, Journal of Narrative and Language Studies, Asian, Journal of Women's Studies, and Asiatic, among others. And to again apprise our audience that he has been, like, as I told you, vividly and widely published in Scopus Index and Elsevier publication. So we look forward to your talk, sir. And I invite you to the platform for your kind deliberation on post-colonial ecologies. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the warm invitation, and at the same time for this kind of generous introduction. Thanks to the whole team of iSPELL, and at the same time to all the members. And yes, just let me correct to all those books that you have mentioned. Those will be published and have been published by Rutledge, and some of them are forthcoming also from Bloomsbury. So now the topic, as we have already mentioned, as you have mentioned, it's about the post-colonial ecologies. So let me make it very clear that it's a wide area, and within this kind of time span or 30 or 40 minutes, it's not at all possible to give a whole kind of dimension of this area. And I'm not going to deal with the literature because that will depend on the readers and at the same time the listeners, how they want to explore those kind of text in relation to post-coloniality and to ecological studies. Rather, today I will try to discuss some of the theoretical implications of post-colonial ecologies. And whatever I will deliberate today, those are some of the theories and their interpretations, as well as their arguments, and some of the books that in the recent area have been published on this uh, diversified and multidisciplinary genre. So before beginning my discussion, I would just like to tell you that a few questions can come up or crossed our mind, like how we, or how can the author recover the land that is already ravaged by the violence of history. And I'm assuming the fact that the listeners are known to some of the dynamics of colonialism. So I'm not going to discuss about that. And I'm also assuming that we know about post-coloniality and ecological studies. So what is the ramification and what is the implication, and what are the interconnectedness between these two genre and two areas? So if I ask you a second question, that how can nature can be historicized without obscuring its ontological difference from human time, and moreover, what becomes of this need for a renewed sense of place when colonialism and globalization are continuously denying local land, and at the same time where pollution, desertification, deforestation, climate change, and other forms of global environmental degradation remind us so forcefully to the ecological interdependencies in any given context. So, when we are talking about this kind of questions, then we have to certainly talk about the notion of imperialism and the politics of being otherization, because the land, as well as the non-white communities, and as well as the settler communities, if we are allying them to the same category, then this kind of questions can be addressed to certain extent. So, as field when or which have similarly been concerned with the ways in which social reality may be changed, or in part through literary, culturally, socio-cultural, socio-political criticism, eco-critical aspect, and post-coloniality, they do share some kind of common things. And as the both fields are emerging at the intersection between humanities, intersection between the concerns relative to the political activism, and these two genre have then intrinsically been concerned with the mooring of the humanities in both the social realities as well as in the material realities. So as a movement, assuming the whole total term post-colonial ecology within a movement, and then in the both cultural context and in the both literary critical context, post-colonial studies emerged at the wake of independence movements from the European colonies, precisely, especially of the British colonies such as India, such as Africa, such as the Caribbean. So if political independence have been achieved, what was at stake when a transition of this political reality into cultural and literary practice come into being? And at the same time, what follows was an entire movement of the former empire to right back to the center. Now this right back to the center can allude us to what Salman Rushdie has mentioned, that it's a kind of memorable formulation, and the newly independent notion set out to rewrite their own histories. What post-colonial writers they are doing, they are trying to rewrite their own history, they're trying to rewrite their own memory. This kind of process of rewriting it can be termed as a process of alternative discourse, can be termed as a process of resistance. So turning the tables on the colonizer who once had said to dominate them, not only economically, but culturally, linguistically, and from other perspectives. So post-colonial literature and the literary criticism which spill out from the cultural politics has hence can be seen as an scholarly intervention by the cultural production as well as political and social realities. Now, while I'm talking about this kind of intervention, in turn, there are also the characteristic of the emergence of eco-criticism, since the very much way of colonization, to certain extent, to a big extent, are centered on colonizing the land and with the non-human entities, the whole genre of eco-criticism come into being. So if post-colonial studies emerge as a corrective of what we saw as a flawed view of the social reality, then the idea that European culture was somehow superior to the non-Western world. Now, eco-criticism in this context can be emerged in a similar corrective way. And it at the same time can set out in a very methodical way to analyze the co-relationship between human beings to the environment, both in animate forms and in inanimate forms. So, like that of post-colonial studies, its agenda can be twofold. First, eco-criticism and ecological studies need to investigate the relationship between man and nature as it played out in a variety of cultural narratives, social narratives, ontological narratives, historical narratives, linguistic narratives, oral narratives, and from literature to film to popular culture to media, so on and so forth. So now, both ecological studies and post-colonial studies have hence pointed to ways in which culture is always embedded in some kind of material reality, in which culture and politics are deeply enmeshed with each other. In order to have impact on world politics, both our ways of thinking have to change. And it is in this sense that ecological studies and post-colonial studies have an element of didactic ontological outlook. They both want to seek to urge humankind to change their ways. And at the same time, however, post-colonialism and eco-criticism may differ in the socio-temporal dimension that is embedded in the respective subject as well as their project. So while post-colonial scholars are trying to tell that post-colonialism is something of accused of being stuck in the past, constantly wanting to write back to the colonizer who, even in the era of decolonization, continue to wield his powerful influence on the formal colonies, eco-criticism and ecological studies, on the other hand, especially concerned with the future of both humankind and the planet. It is hence no coincidence that the René Girard, when he is telling about the final chapter of his Future the Earth, is telling about this kind of different temporalities. Post-colonial studies and ecological studies do share some kind of common simple signal concern. It means the idea that the task of literature and of cultural criticism is to explore and to correct the flawed ways of being the colonial nature in the world. So given the many commonalities between post-colonial studies and eco-criticism, it may be almost surprising that each of these fields seem to have latecomer in the sights of each other, because when we are talking about post-colonialism, we have to talk about the ecological studies, and post-colonial ecologies, they are trying to show the whole genre in a single word, trying to show how land, at the same time, the non-human agencies have been explored by the colonizer in different time, in different context, and in different ways. So post-colonialism has often been faulted for being concerned with the processes of economic and cultural domination, while failing to consider the anthropocentrism of such concern. Why I'm talking about anthropocentric attitude? This anthropocentrism can relate us to the ideas of Dipesh Chakraborty that I can discuss a bit later if possible. So when I am talking about planetarity and anthropocentrism, anthropocentric attitude, it essentially talks about how human beings are trying to conceive, perceive, and explore nature for their own benefit. It's all about the benefit of human beings, and it's all about the benefit of the colonizer in the context of post-colonial ecologies. So conversely, ecology as a source of discipline, as a mode of discipline, has been failed to take into account non-Western concerns when it is only talking about the ecological aspect. For example, if I want to explore a text from the ecological point of view, then we are not talking about that the how land has been explored by the colonizer if the text is not in that ambit. So post-colonial ecology, they are trying to connect this kind of gap in between. Now, the recent studies and the critics have begun to address the synergy that may result from bringing together post-colonialism and at the same time ecology by systematically spelling out some points and at the same time managing something overlapping between these two fields. The recent book, Postcolonial Ecologies, Literature of the Environment, written by it's been edited by Elizabeth Delaway and George Handley. They have given a wonderful introduction to that book. It's a 32 pages introduction that can give you the idea of the various nuanced political, socio-cultural, historical context of post-colonialism and how post-colonialism and ecologies can be studied within a single dimension. In fact, the very title of my term, post-colonial ecologies, are derived from the book Postcolonial Ecologies, Literature of the Environment. It doesn't publish something in year in 2021 or 2022. So when they are telling about their things, previously they have also explored some of the terms, and this kind of collection, they have tried to incorporate some of the concept of post nature. Why I'm telling the concept of post nature? Because they are telling that now the age-old idea of ecological studies have been outdated, like the 1971 Lawrence Buell and all, and the eco-critical reader. Now we are talking about post nature, and we are talking about petrofiction. We are talking about capitalism. We are talking about denialism. We are talking about specificism. So, and at the same time, I don't know whether I will be able to define all these terms in relation to this or not, but yes, to some extent, I will try to tell something about post-colonial, post-human ecological perspective, if possible. So, and at the same time, this kind of study on post-colonial ecologies, this edited volume by the editors have derived their material, and they derive their information from the ecological activist and from the ecological theorist like Rob Nixon. And at the same time, to some extent, the Gaia theory and the Gaia hypothesis, Gaia 2, I am talking about. So, but while they are talking about this kind of phenomena in post-colonial ecologies, there is an emerging area, and at the same time, it is the field that points out how land and man, they both have been explored, and they both can fight back, they both can resist, and land can also write back to us. Thus, in the area of post-colonial ecology, metaphors of the land and its rootedness of the post-colonial subject in his or her or their geography have abounded. Yet these references have largely been read by post-colonial critics in the figurative sense, like the material one and the ecological dimension of the metaphors of the land, of their ethics of land, ethics of animal, and that this kind of thing have gone largely unnoticed or been mentioned in the footnote in the history of colonization. So this is a book that can um, talk us directly to this kind of phenomenon. And we have to remember one thing, that when Fano is telling in the Bridget of the Earth that for a colonized people, the most essential value, because the most concrete is first and foremost is the land which will bring them bread and affordable their dignity. So the land, when the land is explored, when the land is robbed, when the land is manipulated by the power, by the regime, by the authoritative control. So the very foundation of ecology come under crucial attack by the colonizers. And at the same time, when I'm talking about Edward Said, and when I'm talking about culture and imperialism, to particular to this context, when he is also talking about the imagination of anti-imperialistic nature and its primacy with the geographicality in it, is talking about how imperialism, after all, to certain extent, is an act of geographical violence through which virtually every space in the world has been explored, has been mapped, has been charted out, and finally brought under several control. So for the native, the history of colonial servitude can be discussed by the loss of locality to the outsider. Its geographical identity must therefore be searched and somehow can be restored because of the presence of the colonizing outsider. For example, when I'm talking about South African Indian writings, when I'm talking about the apartheid movement, see, the apartheid can, it's the offshoot of the colonization, and at the same time the very Group Area Act of 1950, 1961, they both are talking about how the non-whites and the black, I'm quoting it black, and I'm giving all the other racial categories within this term, and I'm telling that how the black has been segregated to a different land, and how the white are subjected to a different land, different territories. So the very process of Group Area Act is a prime example of how land and at the same time, and the people have been subjected to racial discrimination, racial segregation. And when this kind of power and monopoly and authority work, they are obviously notion of resistance can be taken into account, keeping in mind Judith Butler's theory of vulnerability in resistance that we can see in the post 9/11 writings of Butler. But today, or in this discussion, see, the when we are trying to explore it from the theoretical point of view, it's about the interconnectedness. When I'm talking about Said, when I'm talking about Foucault, or when I'm talking about Bourdieu, and about this concept of habitus or the symbolic power, it's essentially can talk us that history and space, they both are constructed within the periphery of power, and the very periphery of power can bring forth the notion of precarity both for the nature and precarity both for the land, and precarity both for the human beings and both for the non-human beings. And when precarity comes into focus, then precarity essentially gives birth to vulnerability. So see how the theory and theoretical arguments, they are all interconnected. Perhaps have been channelized to some other direction of Butler and all. So writing in 1961, am I audible to all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So so when I'm talking about, for example, 1961 Algeria War of Independence, or the notion of colonial violence in South Africa, be it on India, or be it the very 1971 War of Bangladesh, that also. So, or the more precisely, the Nigerian War. So, regarding all these things, when Said, more precisely the Palestinian scholar, I'm mentioning it, is telling about that the imagination is very much vital to the liberation of land from the restriction of colonization. And yes, we the readers can add that from the neo-colonial perspectives of globalization. So when Seth frames post-colonial writing within the ambit of ecology and positioning it within the framework of recovery, identification, re-identification, retelling of history, he's certainly talking about the myth making that can be enabled by the very structure, by the very voice and very visions of the land. So the questions that I have been that I have asked at the very beginning of my talk today can be answered now. How we can tell or how we can restructure post-colonialism and ecology by talking about the land, by decolonize the land. Now, it should be noted that decolonization and post-colonization, they both are not the same term, and often they are used in within a single dimension, but no, they are not. And decolonial ecology is a bit different from the post-colonial ecologies. So Said's work help us to see that to speak of the post-colonial ecology is to foreground a spatial imagination that is made possible by the experience of place, that the sense of place that Ifu Tuan once said. So Tuan regarding the space and spatio-temporality, Tuan has said that how space can give birth to a new kind of resistance, new kind of political resistance, new kind of social resistance, new kind of cultural resistance. So when we are talking about this kind of urban setting in the expansion of empire, environment, and in terms of wilderness, genealogically in linking the communal ancestry to land, as well as phenomenologically, we are connecting body to the place. So in emphasizing the production of the literary history in the making of the global South, post-colonial studies has utilized the concept of place to question temporal narratives of progress imposed by colonial powers. William Harris, he is a notable critic and historian at the same time. He is talking about the ecological perspective. When he is talking about his notion of fabricity, he is talking about that a civilization which is geared towards progressive realism that can't be solved, the hazard and the dangers and all the pollution which it has been inflicted upon the globe. So within the same epistemological framework, we need to understand how this kind of hazard, dangers, pollution, and progressive realism have failed to work. Place, to some extent, denotes time, suggesting that history are embedded within the land, and she has always provided vital and dynamic methodologies for understanding the transformative impact of empire and the anti-colonial epistemologies that it try to suppress. For example, I am giving you that now when we are seeing from 2014, or it will be a bit political in nature. That's what I will tell you. That in the rise of Hindutva, when we are watching all those movies of the Indian Hindi cinema, be it or Indian Hindi cinema or the pan-Indian cinema, what we are seeing that land has become one of the prime factors from which the kind of resistance they are showing. मिट्टी, मेरे देश की मिट्टी, इस मिट्टी के लिए हम जान दे देंगे. So see, the land is very much embedded in it, and when they are, be it Kesari or be it all other historical movies like Panipat, be it Panipat or be it Jodha Akbar, or be it all the historical movies that now Indian cultural and Bollywood industries or pan-Indian industry are trying to produce, they are all trying to embed that kind of resistance, be it against the non-Hindu or be it against the colonial structure or the British. Mitti land has become one of the prime source of intervention and prime source of exploration in all those movies. And see, they are all telling that is देश के लिए इस मिट्टी के लिए हम जान दे देंगे. So what does it mean? That they will give their life, they will fight, they are fighting for their land, they are fighting for their motherland, because the motherland has been dropped up, because the motherland has been raped, because the motherland has been violated. So the very place, the very notion of place and the land, it denotes the history. And the history, cultural, political, socio-cultural, history of violence history, traumatized history have been embedded in the land, be it in India, be it in Caribbean, be it in South Africa, or be it in Africa, or be it in any other parts where the land has been conquered by the colonial powers. So historicization, to some extent, has been a primary tool of post-colonial studies, as Said and Fanon simply implied. So it's the same central to our argument of the land and by extension the earth. So in order to engage a historical model of ecology and a certain kind of epistemology of the space and time, Harris at the same time, again referring to Harris, that we need to enter into a profound dialogue with the landscape. So when he has propagated his four kind of model, I'm not going to discuss it. One of the model is that it's a kind of interactive interaction, and what we are doing today is one of the part of that model, that it's a profound kind of dialogue and interchange of thoughts and feelings that are very much embedded within the place. And when we are trying to discuss this kind of things, it can imbibe a different kind of feeling in us. Why he is telling it? Because to some extent decolonizing the land is embedded in decolonizing the mind. So this Harris and his models regarding the dialogue is very much necessary, because the decoupling of nature and history can help us to mystify colonial histories of forced migration, history of suffering, and history of human violence. So following and by taking into consideration Harris model, we can certainly talk about the landscape, also the seascape, as a participant in the historical process rather than only a bystander to human experience. So in general, post-colonial ecology must be more than a simple expansion of post-colonial strategies, post-colonial methodologies, post-colonial framework into the realm of human materialistic world. Post-colonial ecologies to certain extent can be reckoned with the ways in which ecology doesn't always work within the frame of human time, mind, and political interest. Ecology work beyond its periphery also. And as such, the whole definition of post-colonial ecology can be the definition of a certain term, certain nuances, certain interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary genre that can reflect a complex epistemology and ontology that recuperate, reiterate, reverberate the very alterity of both history and nature, create an alternative history, and at the same time without reducing the core ethics of the land and the history. Now, while we are talking about, can I get another 15 minutes for the, is there any time limit?
So you can go ahead.
Okay. So while we are talking about this kind of interconnectedness, for example, let me tell you, when Charles Mann talked about the kind of imperialism and the kind of colonialism and the ecological disruption and the exploration that has a long history. He is telling that British settlement of Jamestown in 1607 and at the same time this kind of colonization, it has replaced and degraded so much the native ecosystem that they made it harder and harder for the Indians there to survive in their own native land, and unable to adapt to this kind of foreign landscape, the colonists unleashed what would have become a multi-level ecological assault on North America. When Chris Mann is talking in his article published in 2007. Now, there are so many nuances of this ecology and post-colonial ambit that certainly talks about colonialism is nothing but another name of pollution. This another name of pollution can be termed in kind of land pollution, body pollution, mind pollution, air pollution, animal pollution, and everything. And that kind of industry and the state disrupt and damage many relationships that make up the land where they understand it as a resource. So they use the land to extract value, such as mining, such as the oil, such as other minerals. Now, this when I'm talking about this oil, if it has been a discussion on ecology, literature, and post-coloniality, then readers can explore petrofiction. Petrofiction means when Habila is talking about this kind of work in her, this kind of terms in her work, she is certainly talking about how colonialist has extracted oil from the land, and this kind of extraction of the oil can be are seen in a kind of novels that can be termed as petrofiction. So they use the land to extract value. So that is why I told you that the discussion will be solely from a theoretical point of view, and a theoretical point of view can be explicated, can be explored, can be incorporated, can be contextualized, interconnected within the very periphery of the narrative that we will explore in relation to both these two terms. So the colonial power, they have explored the land, the oil, and to some extent it has been resulted in pollution from radioactive waste to urban sewage as another way to make economic value. So using the land for the best interest of industry, profit settler, or for the colonial government is a central part of colonialism. So this kind of central part of colonialism, when I'm talking about, if we are trying to explore it from the gender's perspective, it will be post-colonial ecological studies in post-colonial ecofeminism, when the nature and the feminine identity will sink into one single territory. So this is how we used to explore the terms. And and at the same time, when we are talking about colonialism, coloniality with all its hierarchy and categories produced by the by colonialism, and the whole destruction of the ecosystem for the sake of economic survival or profit or something else, um, also remain central features of post-colonial states who have achieved independence from former colonies. So when we are talking about coloniality and ecological degradation, destruction of ecological sources, that are also the central theme for those populations and those people who are trying to live places in that declared overseas department of their former colonizer. For example, Martinique can be termed as one such places, or some kind of or Puerto Rico can be termed as a free associated states, or unincorporated territory. While I am so there are three kind of territories. Let me tell you: free associated states, formal colonial one, and unincorporated territory. And while we are talking about this kind of things, we need to understand what Richard Kelly once said, that this kind of spaces can become involuntary host to foreign military bases, such as the nuclear test site for the toxic waste deposit. So this kind of exploration of nature, this kind of toxicity can be termed as the colonial violence of the land, colonial violence of the nature, and post-colonial ecologists can critique this kind of exercise to a vivid way. When Kerry just tried to tell that the scientific study of natural interdependencies of the life forms as they relate to each other and their shared government can be explored, it can come into critique under the post-colonial ecological genre, and has become and at the same time this kind of study has become the one of the important touchstone for the post-colonial scholarship in general. No, but when I'm talking about touchstone, not make it synonymous to the touchstone method of Matthew Arnold. So in the humanities, post-colonial studies have increasingly sought to collaborate with the field of eco-criticism a branch of literary and cultural studies that has been influenced by ecology, and at the same time focusing on the environment and environmentalism in general. Now, for example, if we want to explore a text from this perspective, um, um, Pablo Neruda's poem can be the ones that can be explored in the perspective of post-colonial ecology. Apart from Pablo Neruda, we can explore decolonial activist Martin Carter's poem. When Martin Carter's poem, a very precisely important poem, Listening to the Land. I will urge my students to read the poem, Listening to the Land. This is a very important poem in the perspective of post-colonial ecology. When Carter is telling about the nuance of the poem, he's certainly giving the stress and the importance of paying heed to the histories of colonial violence that is embedded in the earth. And apart from this, when I'm talking about Nigeria, when I'm talking about the petrofiction, then we have to read some of the works of Helon Havila. But this kind of these are the texts that can be read to or in from the Indian perspective, Animals Farm by Indra Sinha and the works of Arundhati Rai. That can be explored from the post-colonial, post-human perspectives. Manjula Padmanabhan Harvest can be a good example of that, from the post-colonial, post-human ecological perspective. Now let me tell something about, for my readers, those who are not aware of the works of Rob Nixon. We need to understand that Rob Nixon is one of the key thinkers who, when he provided us with a set of perceived contrast between post-colonialism and eco-criticism, which within his ambit urgently need to be addressed. Nixon argues that post-colonialists tend to emphasize hybridity over some eco-critical concern with purity, that post-colonialists emphasize narratives of displacement, while at the same time eco-critics often focus on a sense of place. That post-colonialists favor cosmopolitan framework over eco-critics more nation-oriented approach, and that post-colonialists are concerned with reconstructing histories from below, while eco-critics have tended to advocate timeless communion with nature, which especially in settler colonies tends to obscure the very history of violent settlement and genocide. So we need to understand the two different approach while we are working together within the same ambit of resistance, same ambit of claiming the land, same ambit of claiming the ethics of the land, and same ambit of claiming the very agency of the land. So apart from this, at the same time, what do we think that while we are talking about post-colonial ecologies, eco-primitive aspect, eco-primitivism rather, has taken yet another turn. So in the search for the alternative ways of being in the world, eco-critics have often turned towards indigenous cultures, to whom they ascribe as innate knowledge of the land and an almost genetic ecological intuition. So, however, such an perspectives on the ecological Indians, as cited by Gerard, freeze the Native Americans in the primitive stereotype of the some kind of hunter-gatherer figure. So, we need to understand that how the assumption of indigenous environmental virtue can be a fundamental belief system for the deep ecologist and for the many eco-critics. So in general, while okay, I'm just going to finish the discussion with post-colonial, post-human that I was talking previously. So when we are talking about eco-critical perspectives that to certain extent have turned to post-colonial literature in their search for the narrative structure that to some extent suggest an adequate conception of nature and temporal relation. The most important issue in the fact that climate change to some extent and the environmental damage can't easily be brought into a short-term narrative of cause and effect that would destroy clearly, assign responsibility, and suggest immediate action. Greg Gerard, building on the when he is talking about his models, when he is talking about his epistemological ontology of post-colonial ecologies, he is certainly referring to the work of Timothy Clark. And when I'm talking about Timothy Clark and Timothy Morton, we need to read Clark and Morton within the same ambit of post-colonial ecology and post-nature, and particularly Timothy Morton's notion of slow violence can be a good term in this discussion. And they are pointed out that at which various small individual acts have a huge impact on the environment over a long range of time, but no single act of individual can be relocated at the primary or immediate cause of damage. At the same time, conversely, our individual small acts of environmental preservation often appeal banal if we want to entangle it within the same term. Now, while we are talking about this kind of banality, the notion of Susie O'Brien come into context. When Susie O'Brien tried to tell that in the very form of ecology, we need to stop somewhere the sort of radical biocentrism of the deep ecological interventions that is posed on the recognition of the interdependence of all living on all living organism in a network of relation with man as individual species cannot be trusted. At the same time, while Susie Bryan is taking this kind of imperiality of transcendence, Neil Everton at the same time is talking that we need, where do we draw the line between one creature and another? Where does one organism stop and another begin? Is there a boundary between you and between non-living world? In short, to precisely if I tell that, can you make any sense out of the concept of man as a discrete entity? No. And here the man and the history of mankind are very much embedded in the history of the land. And that is why Neil Evenden has tried to show that whenever we read, we need to read post-colonial ecologists, we need to read the history of mankind, the history of human slavery, the history of human oppression in sync with the history of land, history of colonial violence of land, and further close association between land and nature. Now I'm just going to end the discussion with post-colonial, post-human perspectives of ecology. Now, if we are, first of all, for my readers, Cadwell was the first one who talked about post-humanism. And when he's talking about post-humanism, to a certain extent, it's the beyond biology. When we are talking about the beyond biology, there is a difference between transhuman and the post-human. Trans is the process, and when the process is complete, it's the post-human. So which this kind of post-human concept can certainly deconstruct the pervasive boundaries between human and the machines, as well as the human and the animals. So when this has gone hand in hand with the envisioning agency and not necessarily connected to being human. In contrast, due to colonialism's degrading of the identities and the humanity of the colonized, the affirmation of the humanity of colonized people has remained as an important part of anti-colonial and anti-racist work. But when this kind of work is going on, when we are talking something about the beyond geographical space and beyond biological space, when the post-human entities are very much embedded in a land, this kind of post-human entities certainly give us a kind of decolonizing aspect of the colonial notion of knowledge, production, construction, and at the same time distribution of the general perceived dimension and definition of human body. When we transcend that, when we encompass that, and when we subvert that kind of stereotype definition of human body, stereotype definition of biological nature of human being, when we entered into the dimension of post-human, and when you relate it with the notion of the land and ethics, there the whole ambit can be read as the post-colonial, post-human perspectives on the ecological studies. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for your enlightening and very informative lectures and your talk. As you have already covered various talks and top points and terminology of post-colonial ecologies, post-human terminologies. Also, you have covered ecofeminism and petrofiction. That is the first, this word I have heard for the first time from your talk, sir. So thank you for your talk and thank you for your informative lecture. Now, dear friends, this session is open for question and session. If you have any question, queries, or any opinion, any suggestion regarding this talk, you can share on this platform. Now, this session, this platform is open for you.
And before we move ahead, I would like to correct myself and update our audience that the publication of books by Dr. Karmakar is Rutledge by Taylor and Francis Group, not Rural Publications, as my abbreviated notes took me to. Have been reading some books on that with that publication, and I didn't know that its acknowledgement would come here in this form. So it's Rutledge by Taylor and Francis. So I can see a few of the questions mentioned by our audience in the chat box. One is by Vinay Vasule. He is seeking you to throw some light on the concept of power from decolonial perspective.
Okay. When we are talking about power from the decolonial perspective, let me tell you something about to make you feel more comfortable about power and decoloniality. Let me tell you precisely about what is decoloniality and ecology. Look, decoloniality in a very simple term. It's a very loaded.
Hello, sir.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So it's a very loaded term about how the power and the decoloniality and how both this work. When we are talking about the decoloniality, let me make it very precise and very simple about the decoloniality and ecology in relation to power. So when we are talking about the ecological studies and the practice that are very much crucial to the understanding and guiding a more positive framework between people and ecosystem, ecology as a discipline and the diversity of those who can call themselves as the ecologists have also been shaped and to some extent pushed back by often the exclusionary Western approach to knowing and doing ecology. So this kind of knowing and doing ecology have a certain kind of ontological approach in nature, and to overcome this kind of historical constraint and to make ecology inclusive of the diverse people inhabit in the earth's varied ecosystem, and those who are succumbed to power, ecological studies must need to expand the knowledge both in theory and both in practice. And when we are talking about power and decoloniality and how to decolonize this kind of power structure within ecology, we need to incorporate varied perspectives and approaches and interpretation from the natural government, from the natural environment, from the land, and from the across the whole global system. We need to understand that power can be decolonized only when we need to decolonize our mind. We need to know our history. We need to decolonize the access, and we need to decolonize the expertise that are exploiting the land, and we need to practice moral, ethical ecology in exclusive, not in exclusive, in inclusive terms. So we need to challenge the very disciplinarity of power to become more inclusive, to become more critical, to become more creative, and to be more ethical. This ethic, I am talking about the Levinas' point of view, that we need to understand when Levinas is talking about ethics, he's certainly talking about by appreciating the other in a simple single term. This kind of practicality and appreciating the other gave birth to the notion of Gayatri Chakraborty's Spivak subaltern studies. Next question. I can see a few in the chat box. First of all, two queries. Do you think the application of post-colonial eco-critical scholarship has helped in broadening the perspectives of the treatment of the land by post-colonial indigenous communities? Yes, to some extent. We need to understand and we need to incorporate indigenous epistemology, and at the same time, we need to incorporate natural environmental ethics. And when we are talking about post-colonial eco-critical aspect, they are somehow not fully incorporating that. A decolonial approach is more radical in this nature. And how has it facilitated different approaches to peer into text and acknowledge the concern of conflicting relationship between human and non-human within the environment? That does it offer a praxis for the maintenance of the harmony and equilibrium? When we are talking about this kind of harmony, when we are talking about the praxis, post-colonial eco-critical perspective in the selected text like Amitabh Ghosh, it has been mentioned there, like Manjula one, or like the Helen Havila, or like the Carter one, or the Pablo Neruda. When they are talking about this kind of terms, they are to some extent not only making people aware of those kind of colonial violence, or of those kind of exploration, of those kind of manipulation of the energy and the power and the natural resources, but at the same time they are also making people aware of how we have been explored, how land has been explored, how the natural resources have been toxified, and give birth to the notion of anthropocentric mode of exploration in general context. So this kind of reading of the text in light of post-colonial ecology can certainly lead us to a notion that how we have been explored both as the human and non-human entities, as well as the natural environment. And at the same time, when we are talking about this kind of post-coloniality and this kind of ethics, we need to think about the post-colonial eco-critical divide, and at the same time praxis between planetarity and the aesthetics of the earth in general. So we need to understand that this kind of interaction can certainly talk about global climate justice, and at the same time giving the exact amount of dignity that one, be it nature or non-human nature, entail and deserve.
Thank you,
What
sir.
was the second poet, sir? That's the Pablo Neruda and the Carter. Timothy Clark is not a poet, brother. Timothy Clark and Timothy Morton, they are trying to explore certain ecological perspectives from they are the activists and the thinkers, you can say.
So there is one question by Prasanna Chakravarti, sir. Sir is asking, can we study the Hungry Tides or the Gun Island by Amitabh Ghosh as a post-colonial ecology?
Yes, we can. We can certainly explore that. We can certainly explore that. Look, I have already discussed how we need to explore the text. So any narrative that narratives that come within the ambit of it can be explored in that way. Not only Gun Island, or not only the Hungry Tide, but also some other text that has a that is sharing the same colonial history of land and the people can be explored in that context. One of my questions have been answered by Pritiji. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Any more questions?
Pratima, is there any question in the chat box, please?
No, I can't see any more.
Then,
I think we can move.
shall we proceed?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Goutam Karmakar sir, for your enlightening, very beautiful and very interesting talk and interactive and engaging talk, you can say. Now, ma'am, can we proceed or?
Yes, you may proceed to the to the chair. Like you can introduce the chair to the
before going into the next schedule. I wish to give chance to Professor Goutam sir if he is with us.
Lakshmikant, please proceed.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Please
Okay,
request the
thank you.
chairperson.
Okay, sir. So now we are moving to another section for the technical section, you can say. Now I would like to invite the today's chairperson of this 94th Sunday Scientific Satsang, Dr. A.S. Puama ma'am is a principal and associate professor of English at Kaveri College, Virajpet, Karnataka. Let me give some short introduction about the madam. Ma'am is working as a principal at Kaveri College, Virajpet. Ma'am has completed her MA, MPhil, and PhD. She was working, or she was associated with the Kaveri College, Goni Gopal, Karnataka. She has worked as a IQC coordinator at Kaveri College, Goni Gopal, and she was worked as a member of BOS University of Mangalore. She worked as a president of Royal Rotary International Dist in 3180 in Goni Gopal, 2004 to 2005. Ma'am is a member and she is associated with the several literary associations. Ma'am has published various papers in national and international journals of repute. Especially, I would like to mention published creative poems and short stories. Ma'am has prepared lesson notes for distance education for the Mangalore University, especially for PG studies in English. And ma'am has presented various papers, especially in the regional, state, national and international seminars. So without wasting time, let me invite Dr. Puama ma'am. Please, ma'am. Over to you.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible? Shall I begin?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me first thank Dr. Preeti Chowdhury for including me in the Sunday Sahityik Satsang of the iSPELL literary platform. This is an opportunity for me to celebrate the literary feast by basking under the literary shower of knowledge of ideological drops so that I can take it back home and mull over. I thank iSPELL, Dr. Goutam sir and his intellectual team for such wonderful opportunities. Talking about the present discussion or present discourse on post-colonial ecologies, Dr. Goutam Karmakar has taken us on a wonderful journey through theoretical implications of ecologies and multidisciplinary genre, dynamics of colonialism, the notion of imperialism and the birth of eco-criticism and ecofeminism. And at length, he spoke on the Harris model, historicization of post-colonial ecologies, land, time, and history. He referred to Robertson and the narratives of displacement and eco-critical perspectives, ended with post-human perspectives. So the environmental post-colonialism is a literary response, and it is an academic investigation of the environmental repercussions of colonial destruction. It brings eco-critical studies into a dialogue with post-colonial studies, as Dr. Goutam has pointed out, and also with post-colonial studies, and also by examining African, Caribbean, Pacific Island, and South Asian literatures, and how they depict the relationship between humans and nature. So this discourse makes a compelling argument for a more global approach to thinking through our current environmental crisis, turning to the contemporary production of post-colonial novelists and poets. This discourse poses the literary imagination as crucial to imagining what Edward Glissant calls the aesthetics of the earth. So herein I'd like to point out a poem, very important poem by one of the Nigerian writers, the poet, Our Earth Will Not Die by Ni Osundere. The eco-critical analysis of the poem Our Earth Will Not Die explore an emergence of the environmental crisis for the sustainable environment. To put it simply, it's a meditation on an environment, our Earth. The poem Our Earth Will Not Die evokes Earth's well-being in the future through his optimistic voice, which does not believe that the Earth will end. This poem talks about human activities which are directly affecting the environment and creating crisis all around the planet. Even the destructive activities are done, the poet keeps hope for the Earth's long life. It creates a picturesque description of humans' activity towards the environment. The poet has a strong belief that the Earth will not die because very soon people will understand its importance in their life. The poet has created a picture of the massive destruction of the environment through his powerful words. Osundere has brought the environment to show in this poem with the hope of making people aware of their activities. When literature brings environmental issues, there emerges eco-criticism. Therefore, this poem brings people's exploiting activity in a literary form. It has a hope that people will understand the real importance of nature in their lives and accept the responsibility to bring the nature back in its past form. So the title itself brings optimistic tone as Our Earth Will Not Die. Eco-critical analysis of the poem Our Earth Will Not Die by Ni Osundere is concerned with nature, environmental crisis, our earth, and human poem. So that I think is an important point where there is so much of positivity that he generates in that poem by bringing into focus that people should realize that nature has to be looked after. We need to develop a healthy relationship with nature. So eco-criticism was actually inaugurated around 1980s as a result of environment revolution that had begun around 1960s after the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. It gives importance to the relationship between human beings and nature. How are human beings affecting nature and vice versa? So the characteristics of eco-criticism to point out, in eco-criticism, nature is the center, not the man. It is the study of literature and physical environment. It is an earth-centered approach to the literary study. Ecologically, man is the ultimate villain. Eco-criticism says that we all are equal. The main purpose is to protect the earth. So it was William Ruckert was believed to have coined the term eco-criticism in 1978, which he defines as the application of ecology and ecological concepts to the study of literature. So post-colonial ecologies foregrounds the vital role of the literary imagination in the process of decolonization. Said doesn't elaborate on the challenges such imaginative recovery inevitably confronts. How can an author recover land that is already ravaged by the violence of history? How can nature be historicized without obscuring its ontological difference from human time? Moreover, what becomes of this need for a renewed sense of place when colonialism and globalization deny local land sovereignty, and when pollution, desertification, deforestation, climate change, and other forms of global environmental degradation remind us so faithfully of the ecological interdependence of my given space. So Saif's work help us to speak of post-colonial ecology, to foreground a spatial imagination made possible by the experience of place. Place has infinite meanings. For example, place has infinite meanings and morphologies. It might be defined geographically in terms of the expansion of empire, environmentally in terms of wilderness or urban settings, genealogically in linking communal ancestry to land, as well as phenomenologically connecting to land, connecting to body, to place, in emphasizing the production of history in the making of the global South. Post-colonial studies has utilized the concept of place to question temporal narratives of progress imposed by colonial powers. As Guyanese author Wilson Harris has observed, a civilization which is geared towards progressive realism cannot solve the hazards and the dangers and the pollution which it has inflicted upon the globe within the same epistemological framework. Place encodes time, suggesting that histories embedded in the land and sea have always provided vital dynamic methodologies for understanding the transformative impact of empire and the anti-colonial epistemologies it tries to suppress. So, this really reminds us of how beautifully Dr. Goutam Karmakar has taken us through the theological aspects, and then how important it is to globally look at nature as something very crucial in today's world. If we do not take care of nature, if we do not establish a harmonious relationship with nature and take care of nature, nature will not take care of us. So as such, post-colonial ecologies relating to literature, what we would like to talk about, will bring out the kind of destruction that man has been committing over a period of time, and bringing awareness into his mind, and then trying to tell him that, look, it's high time that you look at nature and worship nature. Look at nature, take care of nature, so that nature will take care of you. So let us think of all this and try to create a world of harmony in future at least. And I hope eco-critical analysis of all the narratives, of all the literary works will help us in future to bring about a change in this world. Thank you.
Yes, yes. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yes, you have aptly summarized the points. That's lovely. Yes, we need to take care of all those things, not only in the literary perspectives, but in the very social activities that we are doing.
Yeah, definitely.
The whole ambit must need to be only encircled and enclosed within the writings, but we need to practice those.
Yeah.
And I'm just astounded to see the amount of work that you as a whole team, you, Kapgate ji and Preeti Chaudhary ji, you all are doing. Yeah, and I'm happy to be the concluding member of the not only the session but only for this session. It's wonderful. This kind of work should be done by other institutions and by other activists in general to promote this kind of ideas.
So
Thanks a lot, sir.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your pinpointed observation on the degradation of, as I say, Jal Jangal Jameen in the post-colonial era. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
now we are moving away to the distribution, ahead to the distribution of the certificates. I request Dengre sir, Dr. Dengre sir, to distribute these certificates.
Lakshmikant sir, please invite Professor Ghanshyam sir.
Okay, sir. Now I'd like to invite Dr. G. Ghanshyam sir. Sir will distribute the certificates. Sir, please.
Thank you, Pramod and Lakshmikant. Indeed, it was wonderful listening to Goutam. And I was thinking of yesterday I visited a college wherein near the campus I have seen the banyan tree. And I was thinking of how Siddharth has been personified rather, or a metamorphosis of Siddhartha into Gautam. So today also I found the Gautam here, and it's a kind of a metamorphosis of Siddhartha into Gautam. Indeed, it's a pleasure listening to all the eco-criticism, ecological issues, and also related to nature and nurturing the nature. Because if we start thinking about nurturing the nature, it's nothing but it has to come in nature, basically, and it has to be instilled as far as the students and the generations are concerned. And as the mother cares their children, in the same way, we need to care the mother earth. And if we have that kind of a habit, if we have that kind of an intuition rather, and if that comes in the family as a rules and regulations, I think there is nothing to worry as far as the sustainable environment is concerned. So I think being the teachers and being the practitioners, being the readers, being the researchers, we need to understand this particular aspect that yes, we are there to protect nature and to take care of nature. And sir, you have really done a wonderful job as far as presenting your thoughts are concerned. You have not only made us to understand various nuances related to ecological and eco-criticism, but at the same time, you have referred to various other people and you have given immense scope for each one of us to write research papers and also to work on these issues, which is called as the cross-cutting issue nowadays in the this highly technological world of ours. We are highly sounded and bombarded with softwares and hardwares, but where is the humanware? So humanware is the most important thing, even in this artificial intelligence world. The computers and all the ICTs may be having the intelligent quotient or the artificial intelligence. But what about the emotional or the spiritual or the social or the psychological quotient, and for which only the human being can take care of all these things. So from human being to being human is a long gap. So let all of us make this gap a very small gap, and let all of us become the being human rather than the human beings. So for doing honors on this platform by throwing light on various issues, this certificate goes to Dr. Goutam Karmakar for showering a good kind of a lecture which was worth listening to on this Sunday. So thank you very much, sir, for doing the honors on 94th Sunday Sahityik Satsang.
Thank you.
This certificate goes to Dr. A.S. Puamma, and always it is a known fact that when a flower blooms, it spreads fragrance. And it's the beauty of the flower which attracts people. And that's why in Hindi we call it Pushp. And the chairperson of today's evening is Pushpa Puamma. So Pushpa and Pushp, the fragrance and the flower, and that too, she has done a wonderful kind of homework, and also listening to Dr. Goutam and making notes on every aspect of it, and then speaking to the tune of the speaker, it requires a great deal of confidence. It requires a great deal of sincerity. It requires a great deal of faithfulness. At the same time, it requires interest also. For being there as the chairperson right from the word go to the last, I present this certificate on behalf of iSPELL to Dr. A.S. Pomma for doing the honors. Ma'am, please
Thank
accept
you.
it.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
This certificate goes to Mr. Lakshmikant for doing the honors as the Master of Ceremonies. And indeed, it's good to see people, those who are coming on the platform of iSPELL, and many of them, they are asking whether we will get the participation certificate. Yes, we don't provide the participation certificate, but we request you to participate in the activities of iSPELL to certify yourself. Because certificates may not certify you, but yes, you can certify the certificate very well. So that's the basic essence of iSPELL, not providing the participation certificate, but we do facilitate people to elevate themselves so that they can become the Master of Ceremonies or chairpersons or the speakers on the platform of iSPELL, and they can have this certificate. So Lakshmikant, for doing the honors, this certificate goes to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
And this certificate goes to the event coordinator of the month, Dr. Preeti Chaudhary, who has done a wonderful job of bringing all the people from all corners of the globe and also making this complete month as the month of eco-criticism. So in a way, this entire month was devoted to a very burning topic, cross-cutting issue of sustainable and also sustainability, eco-consciousness, eco-criticism, ecology, everything has been mixed into it. And even this month, as far as India is concerned, is the month of rain. So we had the rain also, the showers were there, and even the nature is going to look brighter and bigger in these days to come. And for bringing all these scholars on this particular evening, on these evenings rather, and also making all of us to listen to these people is really a wonderful treat. For doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL. This certificate is proudly presented to Dr. Preeti Chaudhary, the president of iSPELL Rajasthan Forum, and also the coordinator for the month of June. Thank you very much, Dr. Preeti Chaudhary.
Thanks a lot, sir. Deeply obliged. Thank you. And thank you for providing this opportunity.
Thank you.
Rajasthan Forum to host.
Yeah, the month of July will start with another theme, and Dr. Nisha Venugopal is going to be the chairperson, and Dr. P. Bhaskaran Nair is going to throw light on can't cover the portion. So this is another event that we are planning in the month of July, which is going to be devoted to various other aspects of language and literature. So do join us, and if you are interested to create a forum of iSPELL in any of your states, so please do contact us, because we have 8 forums in the country, right from Chhattisgarh, Tripura, South Karnataka, Rajasthan, West Bengal, East Maharashtra, Assam, and Tamil Nadu. We are looking forward to have many more forums in the country so that all of us can come together on the platform of iSPELL and also do something better for the benefit of the humanity and especially for the benefit of the fraternity. Thank you very much. Keep yourself safe and healthy. Thanks a lot for being there on the platform of iSPELL.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to you all.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, you are always a source of inspiration to all of us. As you have already given many words to us, one more words that you have given in this talk, that Goutam, and that situation is really interesting, and the explanation is very beautiful. Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir. So now we are moving ahead to the.
Goutam, it was really amazing to see you. It's a kind of an extempore on post-colonial ecology. Really wonderful.
I am thankful to Preeti ji for giving me the opportunity to deliver my thoughts and all.
Thanks a lot, sir, for being here. And at the Ishan sir, do you have something to say? Because I would be moving on to my valedictory notes if you're over. Lakshmi sir, sorry.
No, sir, no, ma'am. You proceed, please.
So at the valedictory of this month, this 1 month series of lectures on eco-criticism, I take this opportunity to thank Ghanshyam sir for providing this opportunity to Rajasthan Forum to host this line of activity. I stay privileged and obliged to the whole team of founders and executives of iSPELL India. And my special thanks to Pramod Dhengle sir for his constant creative and spinal support to us throughout the journey. I also thank all the speakers and chairpersons and master of ceremonies for being with us and making it such a success. We stand obliged, deeply obliged. I also extend my warm gratitude to whole team of Rajasthan Forum and my special thanks to Vishakha ma'am for joining us here in every session. I thank Shalini ma'am and Hasina ma'am as well for their intent and wishes for these series of sessions. I thank all our participants who actually get the discourse going and without whom we are just noises and not voices. So, and for the session today, I would again like to thank Dr. Karmakar for apprising us on the theoretical paradigms of post-colonial ecologies. And I thank our chairperson, Dr. Puoma ma'am, again for her elaborate reflections on the session. And many, many thanks to Mr. Lakshmikant Kapgate sir for actually being the master of ceremonies and making it go so smooth and well. And this is my gratitude note to iSPELL India and to every person who has been in any way a part of it. This journey was truly heartwarming and I stand deeply obliged. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
So we can call it today and call it a month actually. Thanks a lot once again to our chair and keynote speaker. And have a very good night, Goutam sir. I guess it's morning there.
No, it's evening time now. It will be evening time.
Okay.
Okay, take
Okay,
care.
sir.
You,
Thanks a
you
lot.
all take care.
And special thanks to Preeti Chaudhary ma'am, who is a president of Rajasthan Forum, for conducting all these sessions smoothly and handling events very wonderfully. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Gratitude. Thanks.
So thanks Lakshmikant Parallel also. I thought I'll change his name.